Welcome to a special edition of the BioCentury This Week podcast. I'm Jeff Cranmer, Executive Editor here at BioCentury, and today we are once again turning our focus to Europe, in particular, the Belgian biopharma ecosystem on the eve of BioCentury and EBD's 25th BioEquity Europe Conference. This year's meeting kicks off May 12th in Bruges. Of course, it is known for many things in addition to biotech, beer, chocolate, you name it. So we've got a few special guests to help us set the stage for the event. We have Henk Joos, who returns to the podcast after a couple of year hiatus. He is an investment specialist with Medvia. We have McKinsey's Zurich-based partner, Alexandra Zemp, and we have Claire Macht, Portfolio Director of Europe at EBD Group. And from the BioCentury side, we're joined by BioCentury co-founder, president, and CEO David Flores, editor-in-chief Simone Fishburn, as well as the man behind the curtain of all BioCentury's conferences, Josh Berlin. I'd like to jump right in here and bring in Simone to tell us a little bit about the themes of this year's event. Simone, I know you've been thinking bioequity all the time lately. Tell us what you got.
Thanks, Jeff. It is really a pleasure to do this. 25 years, gosh, that's a long time. And what I'm going to talk about in a minute for the theme, Dave can tell me afterwards, has this theme always been the case? So what we're really talking about this year, because Jeff says that I've been thinking a lot or exclusively about bioequity. Unfortunately, today, that is not the case. We are drinking from the fire hose in terms of news, things changing, the way the world and the biotech ecosystem globally is changing. So the theme for this year is biotech's complex moment. What's next for Europe? And in how long have I been here, Dave? Like 12 years, 13? I don't know. It's a little while, decade plus. It feels like this moment is more complex. And, just to put a little bit of background to that or color behind that, the rise of innovation from China, the rise of China as a source previously of capital, but now also of actual innovation that is being tapped globally is really significant. And we've seen a lot of East-West deals. And so one thing that we will be digging into in the scene setter, which is my pleasure to moderate a session on that, will be what's Europe's footprint. Is Europe actually is it taking advantage of this moment in terms of finding this new source of innovation? And to what degree is that part of Europe's ability to address this moment? And then, of course, we can't ignore that the largest biotech ecosystem is in the US, which is, how can I put this, Jeff? We've been on many podcasts talking about it. I'm going to go with the uncertainty as the word for the moment. So we've seen changes at FDA. We've seen changes at NIH, which is obviously the source of a lot of the innovation. And then we've got the capital markets, which I think have gone in a direction that maybe many people didn't think it would look like this just a few months ago. So there's really a lot going on in terms of complexity. And, the real question for Europe is, can it step in? Can it address some of the issues it's had in the past in terms of really creating a very, very vibrant ecosystem? We've got areas like Belgium, which have been successful. And you're going to talk a little bit more about that, Jeff, on this call.
Yeah, before we jump into that with Henk, you did raise the point, Dave, was this always the theme? So I'm curious, David, back in the day, were the themes similar?
Oh, this is actually going to be quite fun because we're putting together, after Simone's session, we're having what we're calling a founders session. And it's a little bit like John Belushi running around saying we're putting the band back together. And so this is on the opening evening. And so I think what we're going to point out to everyone related to the theme's always the same. One of the points is we founded with EBD, we founded bioequity based on the realization that we all had that Europe at the time in the late 90s was creating too many biotech companies without ever having given any thought to how to fund them. And so you could see a cash crunch coming. And in addition to that, in reference to what Simone was saying about the capital markets, and she didn't say it outright, but there's a lot of politics going on. There's geopolitics, there's national politics, there's nationalistic politics. And I just need to remind everyone that given this fraud environment, that bioequity first was launched in May of 2000. And what happened in 2000 that everyone remembers? March 3rd, 2000, the Clinton-Blair proclamations about the patentability of the human genome blew up the genomics bubble. And it was a downhill ride on a roller coaster then. So when we got to bioequity, there's some similarities to like how it feels today and the political impetus for what happened. So what we're going to do is get EBD founder Carla Schropp is going to join me and the BioCentury chairman and co-founder Karen Bernstein and a group of people most of you know, but from 25 years ago, they were largely at different jobs or at different firms, but there was Sophie Nova, TVM Capital, Nomura Phase 4 Ventures, and some really great names, Robertson Stevens, Deutsche Bank, and Cowan and Company, and they were all essential to creating, this industry that we're all working in now. So we're getting people from the founders group from these institutions. And when we asked them 25 years ago, will they help us create bioequity Europe, they all stepped in. So now we're going to go back. We're going to talk about where they've been, what jobs they've changed. Not all of them are in banking anymore, or they're not all in venture, but they all have some perspective on this question you asked, Jeff, which is what has changed, what has not changed, and maybe how to think about it.
Awesome. Well, I want to hear about what is changing in Belgium. Henk, you are coming to us from Medvia, which represents biotech and health tech in Flanders. Would love to get your take on your native land and what trends you're seeing in biotech there.
Well, first of all, I'd like to express on behalf of the regional hosts our gratitude and our sincere thanks for BioCentury and EBD to come back to Belgium after, I believe, a very pleasant edition in 2018 in Ghent. And so we're extremely happy to host you again in beautiful Bruges in 2025 for the 25th edition. And I think the timing could not have been better. We just announced 1 month ago that the two organizations that were bringing together all the different players and all the different ecosystem representatives in the biotech and the health tech space, Medvia and Flanders Bio, that we decided to enter into a merger. The new name of the new organization is going to be announced actually the week before bioequity. And it's quite interesting to see that a small country like Belgium, we will effectively represent more than 500 companies and organizations just coming from Flanders to represent the ecosystem that we're in. If you add to that the companies in the southern part of the country in Wallonia under the BioWin banner, which is also one of the supporters of this event, then we will effectively in Belgium represent about 700 companies and 700 organizations active in biotech and health tech. And we are probably becoming in Belgium one of the few places in Europe where we start to move very strongly ahead. And we have a long tradition in biotech, but we're also starting to move strongly ahead in health tech. And this is one of the things that we start to notice. And actually the regional host panel that we have scheduled for the Tuesday afternoon is going to go into the question, with everything happening in these two worlds, in which are today still different worlds, the biotech and health tech, do we need to start to think in a different way about funding? And do we need to start to think in a different way about how funds should be structured out into the future? Can we continue to have pure biotech funds, pure medtech funds, pure digital health funds? Or do we need to start to think more in an integrated way, like a lot of the big US funds are thinking, and like a lot of the big Asia-based funds are thinking? And of course, there's some, Dave, you already alluded to Sofinova, which is already to some extent doing that. EQT is doing that. Gilde is doing that to some extent. we still see that these are somewhat separate worlds. And so the discussion we're going to have on Tuesday afternoon is, do we need to start to break out of these silos, and do we need to start to think much more holistically when we go out into the future? And that's probably something where Belgium can play a pivotal role also in Europe, given the fact that we are one of the leaders in both of these domains.
Excellent. Thanks for that snapshot there, Henk. I'd like to bring in Alexandra now from McKinsey. McKinsey, of course, longtime BioCentury partner on many of our conferences, from East West in Singapore, next year Korea, to the annual Shanghai Summit, the China Healthcare Summit, and of course our newest conferences, BioCentury Grand Rounds. Alexandra, welcome back to the podcast. Tell me, what trends are you following? I know you're working on the McKinsey report, which will be presented at BioEquity. What's getting you excited in European biotech these days?
Thank you, Jeff. And first of all, very much looking forward to see many friends and colleagues back at BioEquity. And what I thought is I give you a quick summary of what to expect in our report, what trends we are seeing, and what's happening. In a nutshell, I would say, and that's building pretty much on what Simone was saying, is I think probably the current global landscape is somehow testing the resilience of the biotech industry, like we have not seen it before. But I would say even in this phase of economic headwinds and competitive pressures, we see that the European biotech companies are actually proving to be comparably resilient and continue to drive innovation. And let me go a bit deeper in some of these market dynamics I just mentioned, just to give you a few highlights on what to expect in terms of numbers and examples in the report. I think we are right now in a world marked by geopolitical uncertainty, which we all know is a real challenge for biotech and, of course, for all other sectors out there. I think our sector specifically is uniquely global and relies on global supply chains, relies on global talent, etc. And I think while there is a lot of talk right now about this tariffs and what that implies for pharmaceuticals, I think there are also a lot of other challenges that some of them Simone also touched on, such as the expected reduced capacity at regulatory agencies, but also the growing pressure on healthcare costs across the globe and so on. Now, in all these challenges, I think on a positive note, we also see that the industry pipeline is continuing to expand across modalities, across TAs. So I would just say the race for innovation continues. And yet, I would also say it's a race, right? So while the race also comes with intensifying competition, what I'm excited about, if I'm looking at what is upcoming and the trends I'm seeing, is like, number one, I think you can really see now that Asia's innovation engine is creating global value for patients. I think we need to see whether this momentum can be sustained, but I think it really opens up unique partnership opportunities for European biotechs in the East-West spirit. I think similarly, the technological advancements that we see hold enormous potential as we look ahead. And coming back to what I mentioned earlier, that European biotech stand out and linked to the 25-year bioequity theme, I think there are a couple of few interesting nuggets, right? I don't know whether you know that the first approved gene therapy in the Western world was actually done by a European biotech and actually was approved in Europe. I also don't know whether you know that actually the most valued oncology product right now was actually originally developed and invented in Europe. So I think there's a lot of exciting innovation coming for Europe. And I think even if we look ahead and look at where the industry is right now, I think there is much more to come. If you just take the last 2 years, there were more than 20 NME approvals that were actually originated by European biotech. And while I'm talking with all this excitement, Jeff, right, I think, of course, also being very conscious that the funding landscape is tricky, right? We see that there's limited IPOs, slow deal making, private funding being concentrated. Yet what we also see is that on the European VC side, if you compare now towards 2019, there's actually more private money now in the system, 1.5 times what we had pre-pandemic. So yes, it's more concentrated, it's not easy, and there are questions regarding new company formation, but there are also positive signs. So I would just say stay tuned. We're going to go much deeper in a lot of these trends during our presentation and then in the report that we shared BioEquity.
Excellent. I can't wait for that because, yeah, I have been seeing these huge funds come out of a few of the VCs. A lot of VCs very active, sort of the staple names, but you raise an awesome point there. Now, one of the cool things about going to BioEquity is that you get this report early on an exclusive basis. So you get a little bit of a jump on McKinsey's take. That's no small thing. Now, I'd like to bring Claire into the conversation and get into a little of the nitty-gritty of the conference, and then we're going to open it up and just talk about some of the sessions we're really excited about. Claire, what's the outlook for partnering at the meeting, and what can folks attending expect?
Well, Jeff, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here. And like Alexandra and Henk, looking forward to seeing everyone in Bruges in a couple of weeks. On the partnering side, we're looking at double-digit growth across all metrics that we track. Probably two that I'd like to highlight are just the number of meetings is already up 10% on last year. So we're tracking well ahead of where we were in 2024. But maybe just touching on a couple of the points that Alexandra raised about Europe's strong innovation and also Henk's point about the strong biotech ecosystem in Belgium. We're looking at an increase of 56% in licensing opportunities that are posted to the partnering system currently. This means that 2 weeks before the event, we've already surpassed the total number that were posted in 2024. So we're really seeing examples of the strong innovation that you can expect, as Alexandra pointed out, in Europe, and also the strong local ecosystem that Henk has spoken about. And I think also that high number of licensing opportunities also points to the appetite for funding that a lot of these small companies are looking for. So there's going to be a high amount of partnering activity at BioEquity, as there always is. But this year, we're really looking at some extraordinary numbers across the board.
Excellent. Josh, from where you sit, kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes at BioCentury, how are things shaping up?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. We're really, really happy about the incredible turnout we're going to see in Bruges for BioEquity. And I think what I'm most looking forward to is the networking. That's always a favorite part of BioEquity for me. We have well over 300 VCs attending, 250 biotech CEOs attending, quite a few pharma BD&L leaders this year attending as well, and a good dose of folks coming over from both the US and Asia. I think, part of the theme that Simone mentioned at the beginning, we're going to talk about that, and we'll have folks in the audience who can talk about some of these themes that we're seeing in the industry in terms of sourcing innovation from Asia, the NewCo model, and what that means for European biotech and European and Western investors as well. So it's going to be a really good discussion, and I'm looking forward to seeing people in Belgium.
Simone, let me bring you back into it. Any sessions you're excited about in particular? I know you're moderating a fireside chat.
I'm so glad you asked. I was very excited to talk about two things, actually. In addition to the scene setter panel with a host of biotech stars that will open the meeting, I have two fireside chats. One is with Jean-Pierre Laterre, the CEO of Biotech, a local Belgian company and a superstar in its own right. It's particularly interesting in the context of all that we've been talking about for Europe's complex moment is that Biotech ran a phase 1 trial. It went to China to do a phase 1 trial. And it's recently, on the basis of that data, been acquired or announced an agreement to be acquired by AstraZeneca for about $1 billion all told, with something like north of 400 million euros upfront. And that's a particularly interesting and important thing because we are seeing more and more the ability of China companies or Asian companies to generate data, clinical data in China faster and cheaper than in the US. Early clinical data that is de-risking. And so that is actually behind a fair amount of what we call the NewCo wave and the East-West deals that we're seeing. And so digging into, the idea of a Western company going in doing that de-risking study there is going to be very interesting, as well as just the experience of somebody local. And, I hope that that's a boon also for the local ecosystem, a nice buyout there. And another that I'm very excited to take part in is a special breakfast session, a venture lessons in leadership sponsored by Level 20. I will be talking to Anya Koenig, who is the head of Nevada's venture fund. This is really a conversation about women in venture, women in biotech. And my conversations with Anya are always incredibly fun and interesting. And she is not afraid of saying what she thinks. So that's going to be a good session too.
Henk, anything that you're particularly looking forward to at this year's meeting?
Well, I mean, I'm always looking forward to be there together with all the friends in the bioequity ecosystem, the wider ecosystem. As you know, I've been for quite some time also very active towards Asia, and I'm extremely happy to see that all the things that were happening in Asia 5 years ago are now starting to bear fruits. I'd like to come back a little bit to the gloomy sides that some people feel about and try to put things into perspective. I've been 40 years now in the industry. I think we came out of probably one of the deepest crises that we have had to handle in the sector, financial crises. But at the same time, we sometimes forget that developing a product in our sector takes about 3 presidents in the United States and 3 European commissions. We are currently in the middle of a little bit of a special situation with the president of the US doing sometimes a little bit strange things. But I'm absolutely convinced that innovation cannot be stopped by anything. And I think what Alexandra was saying to me is very interesting. And also what Claire was saying, that there's a lot more licensing opportunities. There's a lot of innovation which is ongoing. There's a lot of innovation which is ongoing in a lot of different ecosystems also in Europe. And that cannot be stopped. That will just continue. And that is being accelerated with all the technology that is coming in our direction, with AI that starts to play an important role. I think the only thing that we need to do in Europe in order to be able to continue to handle that is to continue to increase the funding capability and also the funding infrastructure that we have been able to increase over the years and start to follow with that, because we have to put our seatbelts on because innovation is speeding up very, very much at this point in time.
Yeah, Jeff, maybe I'll jump in just on a couple of things Henk and Alexandra said. First off, we do, I think, have record attendance this year from pharma BD and L leaders, and we will have a pharma BD panel talking about what pharma is looking for, which includes Merck MSD, Novo Nordisk, and a few others. So I'm really looking forward to that. And to Henk's point about sort of the future, this is the 25th edition, and we're going to be celebrating that and looking back. But we're also looking to the future, looking to the next 25 years. And so, the last several years, we've had a tradition where we do a panel with the Young VC Collective, and we're going to have that back again, looking at essentially bringing in 5 young VCs, talking about what turns them on about the industry. What are they looking to invest in the companies in the future? And we always have that panel moderated by a couple of established VCs. So we're really happy to have Roll of Syncona and Debbie of BioQ Ventures moderating that session this year. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what the next generation of European VCs are thinking about, particularly in today's climate.
Yeah, and Henk mentioned interest in China. I've been working pretty hard. As our listeners know, I handle choosing presenting companies for our conference, and I've been working hard to get a few Asian names at this meeting. And I'm pleased to say we'll have Jexvow from Japan in the house. That's a company run by Juran Kato, a former Takeda exec. We'll also have Nuvocor, which is a company from Singapore that recently, maybe about a year ago, hired a chief scientific officer out of Philadelphia, and they are backed by Boehringer's venture fund as well as Clavis Bio and EDBI. So a little European, a little Asia money behind that company. We'll also have ChipScreen coming in from China, as well as a couple of other ones in the house. So that always gets me excited and also helps folks who want to learn more about what is happening over in Asia tap into that knowledge there. Dave, anything you're particularly excited about heading to Belgium again?
Well, if it was like the last Belgian meeting, it will be a complete success where everyone is happy and enthusiastic. And for those of you who weren't in Ghent, I think the meeting if it duplicates the kind of togetherness and collegiality that bioequity is known for, people will leave happy. They will leave with new ideas. They will leave with new relationships, which we, of course, as both Josh and Jeff have said, we work very hard to try to globalize this meeting so you end up with global relationships. To go back to this theme, has anything ever changed during the 25 years? I would say that the networking really emerged in Paris in the third bioequity. So we all got together in Munich in the first one, and it was a little unclear what to do because there was no financial market. There was no prospect of a financial market being created in Europe, and it was all sort of like exploratory. And then the second year, we went on, I guess we were in Frankfurt and sort of developed a dialogue. But the third year, we ended up in the old Terry Bourse, which was a vast hall, not many chairs to sit in. And what we ended up doing in desperation is putting up a lot of cocktail rounds around the floor. And
Always a good
once
idea.
we realized that people just couldn't actually sit around and talk. And what ended up happening is that everyone congregated at the cocktail rounds. And I think really, it's a cliche, but the rest is history. It really established what bioequity is about, is that people they come prepared to talk to each other. They come prepared to build these relationships. And, in terms of managing the venue, BioCentury and EBD have to sort of like sort it. So like there's all these different places where you can congregate, it's the one-on-one meetings, lots of one-on-one meetings. I don't know how many, we measure them in 4 figures, right? Those are the planned ones. But then there's all the networking goes on in the hallways, plus the plenaries. We have to sort of organize it so every venue is busy. But the thing that anchors it all is everyone talking to each other. And that's what I'm really looking forward to, because frankly, as the organizers really expect it to happen that way. We try to convene the right setting, and then all of you who are joining us there make it happen. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, great shout out to Claire's team there, Dave. Couldn't do this without Claire and her colleagues at EBD. And of course, special thanks to the regional host and our partners at McKinsey for bringing the insights to another BioCentury meeting. In this meeting, of course, BioCentury and EBD. BioEquityEurope.com is where you'll find more information. Henk, Alexandra, Claire, thanks for joining David, Josh, Simone, and myself on this preview. You will no doubt have a great time at the conference, and I look forward to checking out many of these panels and getting my hands on the McKinsey report, which always just brightens my day because it gives me some fresh insights. Alrighty, we will be back on Monday with the regular session of BioCentury This Week with Simone and, of course, Steve Usden, our man in Washington, to tell you about all of the intrigue that is happening in the Trump 2.0 organization, and we'll have a little more on AACR for you. Special shout out to our production guru, Cole Travis, in the PNW, and a thanks to the Kendall Square Orchestra, which does the music for all of BioCentury's podcasts.